concrete walls. There's a place for us where we could go, where we could be alone. Between city lights, we don't have to hide. I wanna go, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? I can't understand why we can't hold hands, but they don't know what we have is real love. Aren't you sick and tired of having to hide? I know a place, do you wanna follow? There's something in the air, I can't explain it, but it's there. Ain't nobody gonna find us in our secret love affair. I don't wanna have to hide no more, it shouldn't be unfair. I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow? Do you wanna follow? Baby, do you wanna follow? Come with me, do you wanna follow? Baby, can't you see that? I wanna go, and I wanna know, do you wanna follow?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the live stream. Welcome on a Sunday afternoon, but not just any Sunday afternoon. It is Father's Day. And I am here with you. My real children, my second family. Okay, that may be overselling it a little bit. If you're here on Father's Day and not just watching the replay, then thank you for choosing. Thank you for saying to your family, "Hey guys, this is my me time. This is what I want to do for myself. I want to listen to Bardwell talk." And I know, and to all the mostly wives. I mean, I don't want to be sexist, but most of, like 97% of my viewers are men, according to YouTube analytics. So to all of the wives out there who are, oh, you're listening to Bardwell again. I know. Thank you for tolerating me in your home. And, yeah. And, to all of the men out there celebrating Father's Day, what did you get in that, box, that subscription box that, I sent you? Yeah. Did you get that box I sent you that had the quadcopter stuff that I wanted you to test out that you didn't pay anything for that I just sent you? Did you get that? So I'm going to need you to give me your feedback on that. And feel free to keep it afterwards. Don't worry about it. If anybody asks you where that came from, no worries. I got you. I have a shirt given to me by my loving partner for Father's Day. So that's why we're wearing that shirt today. Thank you for that. Wasn't Father's Day on Friday? Isn't Father's Day always on a Sunday? Pretty sure it's always on a Sunday. I don't really know. Here's what's up. I'm going to be taking your questions. I'll be taking your questions here in the chat, the YouTube chat. Blunty is going to be queuing them up. How you doing, Blunty?
Good.
Yes, Blunty is going to be sitting in the background reading the chat and queuing them up. We've already got some messages queued up. So if you are wondering who to tag in order to get their attention, it's not me anymore. It's Blunty. And that's good because he's often noticing questions and comments while I'm just babbling and not reading the chat. And I think it makes the whole stream better. Blunty, we've been doing this for like a month, over a month, hasn't it been?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've been enjoying it. I don't know about you, but I think we've been doing pretty well.
Yeah, I watched some of the replays and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, actually, he said this. And I'm like, oh, everything I said was invalid. I'm sure glad you were there. That's only happened like 2 times, but still.
Yeah. Just a reminder for everybody in chat, by the way, you've only got to ask once typically. If we happen to miss it, we might miss it. But we have a lot of stuff we'll queue up when we see your stuff in chat. Also, don't forget to ask questions. A lot of people hang out and have fun, and that's okay. But you like to have some good questions so people can get the information and you can get your question answered.
Yeah, that's the goal. And if you want to get your question answered, you can ask it in the regular chat. And we, of course, we're not one of those live streams that only answers super chats or only answers questions from members. I've always helped everybody for free, pretty much. And that's not going to change. But these people on the right side of my screen, this is my Discord server. These are my patrons. And so they get a little extra, just a little extra attention. Because they pay my rent and food and diaper money or whatever. So they get a little extra love when we're deciding who to queue up. And, of course, as always, if you want to make sure that I read your question, the way to do it is to hit the $ at the bottom, leave a super chat like this one from Delta Tango Whiskey. And I will be reading the super chats a little later in the stream. We will be getting to those. Last thing before we get into the stream, if I don't read your question, because there's just no way to read all of them, don't take it personally. Just email me. jb@joshuabardwell.com is my email address. You don't have to be anybody special. You don't have to be a patron or a paying member. Everybody's welcome to email me. I do my best to answer those questions, typically less than a day. Some questions take more than a day because it's complicated or annoying or are just busy. But anyone's welcome to do that. So don't feel bad if you don't get read on stream. There's always a way to get help. Let's start with a question from Toggles FPV, who says, my drone has this weird twitchy stutter on my roll and pitch inputs seem way more pronounced with smaller stick inputs than if I do big stick deflections. I can't for the life of me figure it out. 2 of the newest ones have this weird issue one way or the other. And I saw Blunty asking about this in the chat, Toggles, and so I didn't actually see the whole conversation. Sorry, that was my USB, not your computer. Sorry to everybody out there watching the stream. I know computer noises are annoying like that. The diapers aren't for me. When I said diaper money, Neoflyer, the diapers are for my child. It was just a reference. It really was just a reference to the Lonely Island song, Diaper Money, to be honest with you. If you don't know that one, look it up. It's a hoot. So the number one thing that can cause weird, twitchy inputs is in Betaflight 4.4 specifically. And if you are running a high-speed control link like Express LRS at 500 hertz or 1,000 hertz or even 250 hertz, if you're running any high-speed control link on Betaflight 4.4, you must load the correct RC link preset. So you're going to go to the presets tab, you're going to go to RC link category, and you're going to type, like for example, Express LRS, and you're going to load the correct preset. I can't help but notice that there isn't a 1,000 hertz preset. But there you go. I guess I would load the 500 hertz preset for 1,000 and cross my fingers that it all worked out okay. But if you have the wrong preset loaded, it can cause this weird twitching, weird motor noises. It doesn't. I've tried to reproduce. Oops, sorry, wrong scene. I've tried to reproduce this so I could make a video about it, and I can't get it to happen on any of my quads. I have intentionally set the quad to 1,000 hertz. I've set the presets wrong. Can't get it to happen. So if you have video of this problem, especially video with audio where we can hear what's happening, where you were on the default settings and you had this weird problem and then you set the RC Link preset correctly and it fixed it. If you have video of that I can use to demonstrate it for a video, I'd love for you to contact me, email me, jb@joshuabardwell.com. But my best guess, Toggles FPV, is that you don't have the right RC Link preset loaded. Blunty, when you chatted with him about this in the chat, was he like, no, I did that? Or was he like, oh, interesting?
He's like, I don't know what that is, basically.
Okay, so, perfect.
We discussed that he's going to try setting 500. He mentions in chat, I'm going to try setting 500 and 1,000. So if you're not running 1,000, don't set 1,000. He said he saw one in his presets tab. But yeah, if you're running 500, set 500. If you're running 1,000, set 1,000. But
I don't see 1,000 hertz preset.
I don't either. So I would specifically make sure you pick the Express LRS 500 hertz setting if that matches the packet rate that you're running.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a perspective from which you're like, well, why don't the defaults just work? And it's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer. But this must be a case where they have tried to sort of get additional performance out of it, and as a result, the defaults just don't work well on some builds with some high-speed control links. So you should just do that if you're running Express LRS. Any of the high-speed control links, then you should always set the RC Link preset just as a matter of course, whether it causes a problem or not.
And I'll just add on, you mentioned that you've never been able to reproduce it. I haven't either, but I have definitely seen multiple people get it 100% fixed by just setting the preset. Yeah. So
somewhere out there, one of you guys has video of the before and after, and that's what I need is the before. Because if I make a video about this, I want to be able to show people this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like when it's not going right. And so then people can go, oh, mine looks like that. I'm going to fix this. So, okay, great. That's how we do it here. I see some people in the Discord talking about getting the Flow State Blu-ray. That's so exciting. I'll use that as an excuse to plug. In case anybody's new here, no, that is the wrong freaking... Damn it. It's the wrong damn... What is it? Not the best name for a movie, I guess. There's more than one Flow State. If you guys don't know about Flow State, the FPV drone documentary, it is a documentary made by, I say made by me and James Christensen. He did all the real work, and I mostly just paid for him to fly around the world and interview people. So I got an executive producer credit. But he did. It's really, creatively speaking, it's all him. And it's a full-length featured documentary about FPV. Most of the interviews were done around the 2020 to 2021 timeframe, so remote ID features heavily. But it's just a love letter to FPV. If you watch it on one of these streaming platforms, you will get the 90-minute edit. However, are these links too? Huh, interesting. You can also, if you have a Blu-ray player, you can get the full 3 hours of footage. It's like almost 3 hours on the Blu-ray. It was originally going to be 3 40-minute episodes of like a series. And so James edited almost 3 hours of content. And then for reasons, most people didn't want to watch 3 hours of this stuff. So James created a 90-minute edit. And that's what you get if you watch the streaming. But the additional content is currently only available on the Blu-ray. So pop out that old Blu-ray player and see. Anyway, a little plug there for that. Athix FPV is surprised Buckgrinder didn't cuss the whole interview. He did, if I remember correctly, there was some creative editing to make it look like Bachgrinder didn't cuss so that we could get that, the family rating. It's not rated, so I don't know why we didn't leave the cussing in. Philip asks, going back to the question about presets, I use Express LRS 250 hertz. If I set the 250 hertz preset, my throttle feels really sloppy and loose. Philip, that confuses me because as far as I know, the RC Link presets relate only to things like feed forwarding and smoothing. I guess there's smoothing on the throttle too, but not feed forward. Go ahead, Plenty.
Well, each of the presets has 5 different settings for what you want to pick. Like when you choose to choose to pick the ELRS presets. Mm-hmm. So you want to pick, if you want it tighter, you want to pick like the racing or the freestyle one, not the cinematic or the HD one. That's my understanding.
So let's look here. Let's zoom in here and let's look at this closely. The fine tuning is going to be the smoothing, which is going to be.
So I would think if he says
smoother stick input. Hold on. It's going to be smoother stick input, but additional latency. And you're saying that this is the place where you think the throttle could be made to feel sloppy, Plenty?
Yeah, I mean, he says, I guess he says throttle feels sloppy. Okay, maybe that's a little different. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought he meant all the sticks felt sloppy.
So what's interesting about this, if we look at the CLI, let me do this. One of the things that's affected is the feed forward. And I'm pretty sure that feed forward doesn't affect throttle at all. There's a separate throttle boost setting that does exist, but I don't think it's being tweaked in this CLI. So the feed forward settings don't have any effect, but then the fine tuning is the RC smoothing. And RC smoothing, I believe, affects all 4 axes at the same time. So if he were to select the ultra cinematic fine tune, that would add a lot of smoothing to all 4 stick inputs, including throttle. Chat, am I wrong about that? Is the chat jumping up to say, no, smoothing doesn't affect the throttle? I don't think so. So my best guess is that you've selected a smoothing preset like Ultra Cinematic and you need to select something like Racing or Freestyle. But that should be affecting all of your inputs, not just your throttle.
Yeah, he says he chose the first Freestyle preset. So basically the one above Racing there. So that should be fine, I would think. And that should not have really any noticeable latency. He says it's definitely only the throttle. Yeah, I can't think of what would cause that just from the preset.
Yeah, and this is a case where I'm not going to be so rude as to say it's your imagination, because weird shit happens in the world that we can't explain. But there's nothing in this CLI dump that should cause the throttle to have additional delay that I'm aware of. And any delay that this CLI dump creates should create equal delay on all of the channels, not just the throttle. So either something's going on, but it's not obvious what it is. There we go. I'm a bad streamer today. And the best piece of advice I can give you is that what you're describing isn't normal and shouldn't be happening. Now, sometimes that means it's not happening and there's some kind of a placebo effect going on where someone is thinking something's there that's not there. That's possible, and we have to consider it, right? But if you're sure it's there and you're sure it's happening, it doesn't seem like there's anything in this CLI dump that should cause that. So either you found a bug or you're in some unknown situation. Faraday, these Q&As normally go for about 2 hours. We go to about 3 o'clock. And currently we're 18 minutes in and we've taken 1 question. Maybe 2. I talked about flow state. McRolls12 asks, if you were buying new drones and a radio, would you go with Express LRS or TBS Crossfire? You asked what I would go with. So that's the answer I'm going to give you. And there are people who are going to hear this answer and who are going to be mad at me because I'm not going to say the thing that they would pick. But you asked what I would pick. You didn't ask necessarily what I recommend everyone should pick. And I almost never make a single recommendation for everyone because there's no one right best thing. What's the best pizza topping for everyone? There isn't one. Everybody has different preferences. So I would go with Express LRS, and the reason is that Express LRS has a good balance of performance. With Express LRS, I can have 1000 hertz ultra low latency for racing with relatively short range, or I can have 50 hertz kilometers of range with higher latency. I can have everything in between, and that's really nice to be able to put the same receiver on my racing rigs. Haha, Bardwell racing, haha. It's not the latency that's holding me back when I'm racing, it's my lack of practice. I can put the same receiver on my long-range rigs, my freestyle rigs, etc., and get whatever performance I need. That's really nice. Express LRS is widely available. With Crossfire, sometimes it's out of stock and you just can't get it. And that's because TBS hasn't made enough to meet demand, and there's nowhere else to get a Crossfire receiver. With Express LRS, my preferred vendors for Express LRS receivers are Radiomaster, Jumper, and Happy Model. Radiomaster, iFlight, and Happy Model. The iFlight Express LRS receivers actually seem to have like a hardwire antenna instead of a stranded antenna. The iFlight Express LRS receiver on my AOS 5 has held up to a lot of abuse. I'm really impressed with it. I also like that the iFlight receivers come with a plug. So if you're using an iFlight flight controller, you can just plug it directly in and you don't have to solder. And I'm not scared of soldering, but I'll take a plug if I can get one. But if one of my preferred vendors isn't available, there's other choices. It's open source. Lots of people make Express LRS receivers. So you should never be in a situation where you cannot buy an Express LRS receiver at all because everywhere in the world, they're all out of stock. You get a Flywoo. You get a freaking, I don't know. There's other manufacturers. Sure, go for it. And finally, I really dig the Express LRS team and the passion and excitement that they put into their development. It is fun for me to be not a member, but a spectator, at least, of a project that is developing in new and interesting ways, where every time there's a new release and it's like, oh, look what they've done now. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Whereas Crossfire to me feels a little more stagnant. Now, one of the reasons it's stagnant is that they have done a lot of the cool stuff that already. There's features that Crossfire has that Express LRS still doesn't have. Some of them, a few of them. There's a lot of features that Express LRS that Crossfire doesn't have. So like, the downside of Express LRS though is that it is more complicated. It is less just plug and play and bind and go. Crossfire has its nuances, but Express LRS is more complicated and has a bigger learning curve. But I would go with Express LRS. Today, if you're buying bind and fly quads, a lot of them are available with Express LRS on them. I think the main thing is the technical complexity, and if you're not put off by that, or you're willing to go over that learning curve, go for it. Fortune points out that Express LRS documentation is choice indeed. Their website has incredibly good documentation, and their Discord server is also incredibly good. I gotta say, every week on the FPV Life or the Beginner to FPV Facebook group, there's 13 people like, I just bought this Express LRS and I can't get it to bind. Okay, I made up the number 13, but like, it is a constant. It is a constant stream of people who can't get Express LRS to bind. So we got to be realistic about that. But that would be my pick. Let's do some super chats. Let me get some super chats out of the way. Not too many super chats yet in the stream. We got one from Blizzard FPV, $2.22. What's up? Prop nuts. I don't think that's a question. I think that's just a comment. Was this your crowd surfing song? No. Thank you for your donations, Blizzard FPV. Delta Tango Whiskey, thank you for a $5 super chat. I heard on UAV Tech that he put a capacitor on a 3.3 volt rail for filtering. Is that the same as putting a capacitor on the 3.3 volt pads? Yes, it is. When they talk about the 3.3 volt rail, or the 5 volt rail, that is electronics speak for, like, as you design a PCB, you'll have a 5 volt regulator, And then the output of that 5-volt regulator will be put onto a copper trace or a wire, and that trace will go to all of the 5-volt pads. So all of the 5-volt pads on a flight controller are fed from the same 5-volt regulator, and that is generically referred to as the 5-volt rail. In my head, it goes back to a picture of a literal, like, there were these benches, these electronics workbenches, where you would literally have a rail on the back of the bench, and you would plug or connect a regulator to it, and it would have a certain voltage on it. And then you could just clip to the rail to get 5 volts, anywhere you needed it. That's the picture that I have in my head. I don't know if that's literally the source of that jargon. But yeah, what you would do to put a capacitor on the 3.3 volt rail is you would find a 3.3 volt pad and a ground pad, and you would put the capacitor on the 3.3 volt and the ground pad. Mike Bundy, thank you for a $5 super chat. Mike, very kind. And Tomi FPV says, we'll see if we can find O-rings for the O3. Thanks for a €249 super chat. And that's going to catch us up on the super chat's a little slow today. Usually by 20 minutes in, we have a lot of super chats. That's okay, just more time for the rest of the folks. We got a question here from Garrett Olson, who says, do you think remote ID broadcast can be programmed into a flight controller that has Bluetooth like SpeedyBee? Garrett Olson, let me make that question a little more generic. Like, I don't know if the Bluetooth module on the SpeedyBee flight controller can do the type of broadcast that's needed for remote ID. There are people who say Bluetooth, the range of a Bluetooth signal is only 50 feet. This remote ID thing is dead, dead in the water. And they don't realize that there are different types of Bluetooth technology, and there are some types of Bluetooth that are intended to be a unidirectional low-speed broadcast. And they can have hundreds of feet of range or more. I don't know the actual maximum. But just because something is Bluetooth doesn't mean it's the same Bluetooth that's used to, think about Bluetooth, like your Bluetooth headphones. They're doing an audio connection. It is relatively short range. It is relatively high bandwidth, okay? And their goal is to have low power, high bandwidth, so the range is low. If your goal is to have low bandwidth, you can have longer range, and there are versions of Bluetooth that do that. I don't know whether the chip that's in the SpeedyBee can specifically do that. The other thing is that the SpeedyBee flight controller Bluetooth interface is a serial interface. So you've got this chip that takes a serial data stream in and retransmits it over Bluetooth and does what it's going to do. So I don't know if you could then sort of reprogram the chip to do. I don't know if you could do that with the literal SpeedyBee F405. But the broader question is, in theory, could you have a flight controller with remote ID built in? And the technical answer to that question is sure. Technically speaking, there is no reason why you couldn't take the hardware and firmware that makes a remote ID broadcast device do whatever it needs to do and put that on a flight controller. You could put a video transmitter on the same board as a flight controller. You could put an ESC and a flight controller on the same board. You could do whatever you want, right? But the question then becomes, would that be deemed to be compliant with the regulations by the FAA? And that is a much trickier question that I don't think we have a definitive answer to. The FAA's requirements for remote ID modules includes some kind of tamper resistance. And it is yet to be determined how much tamper resistance is enough tamper resistance for them to be satisfied. Some people have said that tamper resistance means that there's no way that you could run open source code at all, since the code could just be reprogrammed and reflashed, and that would be tampering. Other people have said, nah, we anticipate it'll be much less strict than that. Well, the answer is we don't really know. And we won't know until someone tries it. So
Also, just to be
Yeah,
clear,
Martin.
everything is rubber stamped and will be accepted if you submit it and fill out the paperwork. Whether it will be deemed not appropriate in 6 months or something like that is another story. But they
Right.
are rubber stamping modules, not reviewing anything electronically. It just has to be FCC certified, and it has to be approved through the ASTM guidelines. There's like a checklist you fill out.
Right. But you just take your remote ID module. You say, okay, yep, check, 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 check. I did all those things, and then they give you a document, declaration of conformity, DOC.
Yeah.
And then maybe later, 6 months from now or a year from now, they come back and they say, whoa, wait a minute. And they try and so we just don't know.
Yeah, and then there's real quick, I'll
yeah.
just say there's also like you're probably lying on a federal document at that point, and then there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. Like we're wondering, are the Chinese modules going to attempt to register even if they're not compliant? Can they get by and slide by saying in our test we got this range? Sorry, you didn't. All these kind of questions are really, like you said, up in the air, and we don't really know yet.
Yeah. Let's since we're talking about remote ID, let's talk. And I see a comment here from Joseph Tafari, XJet will save us. It makes me think. I just saw this video from Botgrinder saying, you can say no to remote ID. And you can watch the video. It's easy to find. He does a little, what is remote ID, who needs it, practical application, etc., enforcement, and goes on to what can Americans do. And what his advice is for what Americans can do is don't comply. And that's interesting. It's interesting to me. Obviously, noncompliance is always an option. Noncompliance is always an option. Anytime there's a rule or law, you have the choice as a sort of free adult to decide whether you're going to comply with that rule or not. When you drive on the highway, you can drive the speed limit. You can drive 5 over the speed limit. You can drive 10 over the speed limit. You can drive 20 over the speed limit. If you get caught, you're going to get a ticket, right? You can decide. You make that decision for yourself, though. And the reality is that a lot of people are not going to comply for various reasons. Not everyone's going to say not comply from a principled stance. A lot of people are not going to comply just out of laziness and ignorance. And that's, they just are like, I don't care. It is, I'm not sure, and I say this in the comment below Bachgrinder's video, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm like saying something here on stream behind his back. And the question that I have is, what is noncompliance going to actually do? Where is the path from you as an individual saying, I won't comply, to the FAA saying, oh, we need to change this? Because some people seem to think that noncompliance is the same as like civil disobedience or resistance. That noncompliance is the way to change this rule or prevent this rule. You see that also in XJet's videos, Bruce Simpson, and I don't want anybody to think that the fact that I disagree with Bruce and in some ways disagree with Bachgrinder, I don't want anybody to spin that into like a YouTube beef, especially in this time when we all should be unified behind the belief that this is bullshit and we don't like it. So we're all on the same side of that line, right? But like Bruce Simpson says things like, if everybody hadn't registered their drones, then this wouldn't have happened. That non-compliance at an earlier stage would have prevented us from being where we are now. And I think that's, I have a problem with that. Because for one thing, very few people complied with the registration requirement. How many people actually registered their drones? Some did. Some people were like, okay, $5, I'll register my drones. But if you look at the total number of drone pilots in the U.S., a very small minority of them actually registered. So there already was mass noncompliance, mostly through ignorance, not necessarily through a principled resistance. It didn't prevent us from getting where we're going. And it really feels like almost victim blaming to say to all the people who have been screwed over and will be and are continuing to be screwed over, to say, if 3% of you or 6% of you or whatever the percent was hadn't registered your drones, then we wouldn't be here now. It's the fault of everyone who registered their drone 2 years ago. You guys sold us out. Well, that's what I hear Bruce saying when he's. That's what I hear in a sense, and I think that's really number one, inaccurate and unfair. And I think it is important because if you want to do something to fight, you have to do something effective. And simple non-compliance is not fighting. It's not going to change the rules. The FAA is not going to go, well, shoot, they didn't listen to us. I guess we give up. Okay, guys, you got us. We're changing the rules. Don't comply if you don't want to comply. More power to you. But it's not like in the civil rights era when people of a certain race were prevented from being in certain places. And they said, no, we are going to go to those places and you will have to use violence to remove us from those places. And the implicit violence that is normally out of sight, we are going to make that violence visible by forcing you to turn fire hoses and dogs and batons on us. And that will win the hearts of people over when they see when the implicit violence is made explicit. How could that work with remote ID? Look at the case like Philly Mikey, who got something like $180,000 in fines from the FAA. I'm aware that he was never forced to pay those fines, but my point when bringing that up is that's a case where the ridiculousness of this regulation was made public, very loudly public. High-profile, ridiculous cases that win sentiment to our side, that could be a thing that helps, and non-compliance is how you get there. But if $180,000 in fines for Philly Mikey didn't win the public over to us, I don't know what will. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I guess my question is, if XJet's going to save us, okay? I'll take any savior I can get. What's the plan? In my comment with Bachrinder, and kudos to him, he replied, I respect his reply a lot. One of the things he said was, maybe instead of spending $70,000 suing the FAA in court, we could have some kind of legal defense fund for pilots who are protesting so that they can not have to pay fines. And I'm like, yeah, in principle, I dig that. Say, okay, we're going to not comply, and the people who get fined, we're going to help them fight, and we're going to help them pay their fines and F this thing. Who's doing that? Who's in charge of that? Is that XJet? Is that Bachrinder? I love it. I like that idea a lot. Because when I watch XJet's videos, what I hear is, you guys let this happen to yourself. This is your fault. If you had only listened to me when I told you the sky was falling, the sky wouldn't have fallen. And now that the sky has fallen, the answer is to listen to me some more while I tell you that the sky is going to keep falling. But I don't have a roof for you. I don't have anything to actually keep the sky from falling on your head. I'm just going to keep shouting about how the sky is falling and you guys should have listened to me years ago. And that's not helpful. That's like a dude who is shouting the ship is sinking and everybody else has buckets and is bailing water, and he's going, hey guys, I told you the ship was going to sink. I told you we were going to hit the iceberg. You guys should have listened to me when I said the iceberg was coming. It's like, okay, bro, get a bucket. Start bailing water. Anyway. That's my remote ID rant for today. Anybody who's got a solution, more power to you. The solution is not... I think that today it's clear that any gains made by organizations like Flight Test Community Association, FPV Freedom Coalition, or even the AMA, any gains made by them, and there are some, and have been some, and will be more, will be incremental and marginal, and that the broader scope of remote ID is sort of that die is cast. And so we have to figure out how to live under that. Big Data Pimp says, XJet's right. He's not saying if you had only listened to me. He's saying you should have been listening to all of the people saying it. Tons of us have been saying remote ID needs to be challenged. But remote ID has been challenged. No, not only only race day quads. Yes, race day quads lawsuit was the only legal challenge, right? Everyone else who might have made a legal challenge cast in under that, and they were like, let's put all our effort behind this one point. So there was only one legal challenge. Given how expensive it was, it's not hard to see why. There have been many other steps. It's not like everyone just went, I don't care. There were tens of thousands of responses to the NPRM. And when people say, if only you had done more, I'm like, do you not give credit for the things that were done? A massive amount of work was done and has been done and is continuing to be done. And the fact that we keep losing isn't evidence that we're not fighting. And it's insulting and upsetting to hear people say, the fact that you guys are losing means you're not fighting hard enough. Especially when those people aren't here in America and aren't fighting, and are just sitting somewhere in New Zealand telling about how it ought to be.
Also, just to be clear, if 10 people sued the FAA in the same way RDQ was, they all would have lost. The reason RDQ lost the case is because no one has been prosecuted under remote ID rules. So, like, if you actually follow the case and pay attention to what happened, it doesn't matter how much force you had or how many lawyers you had or what you attempted to do. That case lost because no one has been in trouble yet. And they specifically said that at the end. You can theorize about all these things, and you can theorize about loss of data, and you can theorize about people being tracked, but we can't do anything about it. We do not find a constitutional issue here. You need to come back when somebody has an issue. So, I understand the want for people to have done more and all these things to be hitting them from 18 different angles, but it's not like that would have achieved anything else except wasting more people's money that donated to these projects.
Yeah. Do you, as a FPVFC member, and you just say no, I'm not interested, no comment if you want. Do you want to respond to this comment by Big Data Pimp, who says RDQ are the only ones that made any real fight? Bless the FPVFC, but Bruce is right about what the FAA has been doing to the FPVFC, which presumably he means they've been sort of leading you guys around by the nose and then just doing whatever they want anyway.
I mean, I think Dave would be pretty open to say, I mean, he said before in many of our if you don't know, we have town hall meetings every other Wednesday on our Discord, on the FPVFC Discord, so you can come and talk to us about things. But yeah, I mean, Dave would tell you that, yeah, I mean, at some point we hoped that we could get somewhere. I mean, what else do you do, right? You either don't do anything or you attempt to work through the channels to get somewhere and improve the situation. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's much more we could have done, but yeah, I mean, I think overall we were more positive than we are now. So.
I don't think you guys had any illusions. Like, Blunty, you specifically have a lot of experience dealing with federal regulators and laws in the cannabis industry. So I don't think you had any illusions that the federal government was like going to approach this in good faith or not have an agenda. And you guys went in and said, we're going to try to see what we can get by fighting within the system, and got what you got. But yeah, that's my take on it. We have some pinned comments here. Roborito wants to know, if you're transmitting a compliant signal, why would anyone be inspecting the transmitter? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Why would they inspect the transmitter? It would only be a question if you got sort of dinged and then they took your quad and for some reason wanted to investigate your quad to be sure you were compliant. And then having a transmitter that had a DOC would be necessary. Mike Bergman says, is this a matter of some people accepting there is no reasonable way of changing this and some people who think the opposite? I see what you're getting at, Mike. I mean, I think that Bachgrinder's video, to me, feels like a little bit of a sort of a resignation to the fact that this isn't going to go away. But just because there is no reasonable, I think that there's no reasonable way of getting rid of remote ID writ large, right? And it doesn't seem like any major changes, like changing the 250 gram limit to 1 kilogram or something. It doesn't seem like those are likely. So I think you can have acceptance that that is the state while still trying to make small gains. Like, for example, the FPV-FC is working on protected operations and has gotten some traction on potentially getting protected operations written into the regulation. And if that were to be true, that would be amazing. The idea is that some people think that if you can't get everything you want and just wipe the slate clean, then we're out of here. And other people think, well, I'm going to fight for an inch here and an inch there, even if we lose a mile. And I know we're going to lose the mile, but I'm going to be proud of the inches that I got. Big data pip. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just to be clear, shielded operations looks like we're probably going to lose that too. I mean, the world
sure.
of this is that we're doing what we can, and the reason it's even in the rules in the first place is because we suggested it. But in the BVLOS rules, it's like a rule-making offering. I can't remember what they call it, but it's basically like, hey, we're thinking about doing this, and they ask a bunch of questions to people to submit back, which we did.
Yeah.
One of the things they suggested was that shielded operations would still have detect and avoid on the drone. It's like, that's entirely against the point of shielded operations. Like, the whole point of shielded operations is we're down where the planes can't be. Why would we need to detect and avoid in the shielded operation spaces?
Right.
So they were like, okay, you don't need remote ID, but you do need detect and avoid, which is senseless. So, again, hopefully we can fix this kind of stuff. But, yeah, I just want to be real about that. So.
Yeah, no. You can be real about the fact that it's a hopeless battle. And, what's that story? The Spartans, right? The tiny unit of Spartans that went on the suicide mission to hold the pass against the Persians so the others could escape. And I feel like guys like XJet would be out there going, freaking losers. I don't know. That's a little strong. But
so, yeah, one thing I'll say is a lot of people are asking, and I'd be curious to know what you think as well.
Yeah.
But what do you think the motivation for remote ID is in the first place? So, we know that Congress said, hey, you need to do remote ID in the FAA Reauthorization Act of, I believe, 2018. 2016 started it, and 2018 cemented it. And that's why they did remote ID. But, a lot of people are saying, hey, this is Amazon, this is Google, this is Zipline. Some people are saying, hey, this is DOJ, this is safety people, this is people being scared of threats. Hey, this is inevitable, no matter what, this will happen. Hey, this is aviation. A lot of people are saying, what's the source?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody knows for sure. I think that in the beginning, it was easy to blame the Amazons and the et cetera of the world for wanting to carve out something for drone delivery. I think that has never been as, if you look at the contributors to the DAC and stuff, there's the Commercial Drone Alliance is in there, but ultimately commercial drones have not really been as successful and as people imagined they were going to be. So I do think they're in there, but I think that the people have underestimated the security concerns, and now that we've had all this footage of weaponized FPV drones coming out of Ukraine, I think that the public is more aware of these security concerns than they have been in the past, and it cracks me the fuck up when hobbyists say, stop talking about this, stop showing this footage, because this will just make the lawmakers crack down on us harder. And I'm like, they have been seeing footage like this for 5 years before you even knew it was there, or however long. DHS and whoever else have been showing them and saying, this is scary stuff, we need to do something about this. And ironically, remote ID doesn't really do anything to prevent any of that. So that's stupid. So they've come up with a solution, a non-solution to they've come up with a non-functional solution to an actual problem. But they don't seem to care that the solution, the government said, hey, we need a way to make drones safer and protect the airspace. And the FAA went, yes, sir, and came up with some bullshit. And welcome to the federal government. You know, I ticked the box that said I did the thing I was supposed to do, even though the thing I did doesn't work. I get to keep my job. No one really knows like what % of the motivation was commercial drones, general aviation, DHS, or any other. No, I don't think anyone could possibly know that.
Yeah, I'm going to say my non-FVFC take, my personal take here, I don't, is just that I think if you zoom out and think about what happened, it seems like politics. We got that remote ID bill 2018. Like, again, like you said, people thought it was for safety or whatever. We needed to do this kind of stuff, even though it doesn't actually help. It makes it seem like everything's helpful. Remember, the original pitch was for network-based remote ID. So that would have been every drone ever is on the internet. And if the drone is not on the internet, it's bad, right? So in that world, I guess you can see some dystopian version of that where it makes sense. But then that rolls into the FAA. They don't make up the rules anymore. They make rules from that idea, right? And so it's just a bunch of people who went wild trying to do that because that was their assigned positions. Right. And then you've got a bunch of people in there who like lawyering and doing BS and making crazy rules, and that happened a lot. And I think it kind of rolled into this whole thing. And then, essentially, why would you not include rec? Well, there's two reasons. One, you hate recreational. Or two, recreational. Or two, it's just a lot easier to ignore them. And like, it sure does seem like it's just a lot easier to ignore them because all the commercial people don't want them around because they're just annoying, right? So to me, it looks like the commercial influence was such a big deal because these commercial companies came into this hole that was like, hey, come to our work groups and put people here and spend money on people at the Hill, right? And then that basically rolled into, now all the commercial interests are telling the FAA all the information, and they don't really care about recreational pilots, and it's just easier to continue to ignore them. And the couple voices like us who are saying, hey, please don't ignore us, they don't really seem to care,
It's like you finished this complicated project, and right as you're about to deliver it, someone goes, wait a minute, there's these two things we overlooked, and you're like, can you just shut the fuck up?
Yeah, if we just keep pushing, nobody will know. It's fine. Just push it.
And that's why we don't really get a seat at the table.
That's what it feels like.
Big Data Pimp says, I'm sure there were tons of registrations. You are correct, Big Data Pimp. There were tons of registrations. But that's the numerator on a much, much larger denominator. So I don't remember, Blunty. Do you remember the estimate for what % of drones were registered? I know we tried to come up with an estimate.
I feel like it was like 30% or something, but I'm not sure what the number was.
So you're saying that 70% non-compliance was not enough. Is that the argument that XJet is making? He's like, too many of you complied, and now you got these rules, and it's your own damn fault. Not a direct quote. It's like, well, 70% of us didn't comply. That's a pretty big freaking number. Now, 30% did comply, and maybe that was hundreds of thousands of registrations. Like, well, I don't know what you want though. If 70% non-compliant isn't enough, how are you going to win if that's what it's going to hinge on?
Let me attempt to devil's advocate this real quick. So if you think about it like they're calling remote ID a license plate. Obviously, it's a broadcast license plate, so it's more than that. But they're calling remote ID a license plate. Let's pretend like maybe carrying your license on you, right, is registering your drone. Right? So in that respect, I think it is a bigger statement to drive without a license plate than it is to just drive without your license in your hand. Does that make sense? So I get the idea. Like if
I get the
everybody
idea.
doesn't use remote ID, it's much more visible. It's much more obvious. It's much more apparent. Many more people will get in trouble. Many more trees will get rattled than the people who just don't register and nobody cares about.
Well, if non-compliance is part of a strategy to achieve an end, I'm down. Right? Because if you look at if you take, like, I'm not an expert on the civil rights movement, so I apologize, but if you look at Rosa Parks wasn't a random woman who just decided one day to not sit in the back of the bus. That was all a part of a carefully planned, strategized campaign to fight that rule. She was an intentional trial balloon, and they picked her, and they were ready to support her, and they were ready with legal support, and so on. And so if Bachgrinder says, don't comply, and the first one of you guys that gets dinged, we've got a legal support case. We've got media relations ready to go, and we're gonna find the perfect, beautiful, blue-eyed, brown-haired kid from the suburbs who's going to go on TV and say, I was just flying my drone and the nasty FAA tried to fine me $5,000 from my paper route. And he's going to cry on Katie Couric's shoulder. Let's do it. That's a campaign for social justice. But if the message is F the FAA, middle finger, full stop, that's fine for you as an individual, but that's not going to change things. Bruce has been fighting regulators longer than most of us. That's true. Has he won? Has he changed any rules? Pretty sure. I mean, am I wrong? I'd love to be wrong. Has he got any W's there? Has he pushed and made the rules in New Zealand different than they would have been before that? Because I know he has been persecuted he is no stranger to being persecuted by unrealistic, unreasonable rules. He has been the victim of this kind of persecution before. That doesn't make him an expert on how to prevent this kind of persecution from happening to others. It just means yeah. All right. Well, let's not talk about remote ID for the whole stream, only for like half of the stream. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Like, he's a wonderful troublemaker. I have full respect for his willingness to say, F the rule makers, I'm going to loudly do what I want to do, and I'm going to make an example of myself so people can see how unfair this is. I have a massive amount of respect for him that he continues to do that. I just wish he would stop blaming the victims for their own victimization. As someone who has been victimized by authority out of control, does Bruce say, you think he would know that the authorities are going to victimize you if they decide to do it, and not blame the victims, which is the most annoying thing he does. Say, if you guys had only listened to me and done what I said, even though a lot of people did listen to him and do what he said, but not enough of them. And now you're being victimized, and it's your fault because you didn't listen to me. Okay, whose fault was it when you were victimized? Who didn't you listen to? Maybe government's gonna victimize, and we should focus not on whose fault on it, but what we can do to make it better. Twisted Carbon says Bachgrinder's not against remote ID. He says it's not necessary for freestyle and racing. Yeah, I saw that at the end of his video. I guess we're going to talk about one more thing. At the end of his video, he's like, you shouldn't need remote ID on freestyle and racing drones because that don't have a GPS. And I'm like, bro, are you saying that remote ID is an overreach when applied to freestyle and racing drones, but it's fine when applied to GPS drones? Are you throwing GPS pilots under the bus, just like the AMA wants to throw all FPV pilots under the bus? Okay, that surprised me, and I think that's just I think he's just upset and desperate and has in some ways forgotten his own principles. Because if remote ID is bullshit, which it is, then it's just as bullshit when a DJI drone has to do it as when a freestyle drone has to do it. That is a completely meaningless and arbitrary and self-serving distinction. Remote ID is bullshit on an FPV drone, it's bullshit on a DJI Mavic, and it's bullshit on a fixed wing. It's just bullshit no matter where it is. So stick to your guns there, dude, is what I would say. Long-range drones. Oh, it's okay on long-range drones. I mean, remote ID on long-range drones, I don't know. All right. No. He said something like, not to throw GPS pilots under the bus, but it makes more sense to track them than a freestyle or racing drone. No. Don't let them divide us like that. Not to throw GPS pilots under the bus, but I'm kind of going to shove them over near the wheels just a little bit. No. It doesn't make sense to track any of these things. Okay. Alrighty. Well, that was fun. But that's all we're going to do about that. We're going to go back to the Q&A. I guess I just wanted to rant a little bit about that today, and now I have. Okay. Paul Whittingham is, I don't even know what this question's about. I'm complaining about a fact that iFlight doesn't inform buyers which way around to place the LiPo on the quad. I mean, I must be missing something, Paul. Can we not just, you can figure that out. Mupshot says, I just bought the Mobilite 7 HD with a Walksnail VTX. The range is disappointing at best. Is there a firmware version ideal if I don't need sharing? The firmware that I think is best to use is 32.37.10. I feel like that one has pretty good performance. That's the one I would be on. Are you sure you're at max output power? Yeah. Kilo Foxtrot says, will that be like a 45-minute live stream clip? Yeah, probably. Blunty, you think you're going to put that in one clip? You're going to edit it down?
If I can find a cut point in there, I might, but I think it's probably got to be one coherent clip.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll edit it down and script it out a little bit and try to make an actual video. This freaking remote ID gets clicks, I'll tell you what. If people care about it and are interested in it, then maybe I should be making content about it. More content about it, because I have made a ton of content about it. It's hard not to feel like everybody's talking about me. So when Bachgrinder says, and then there's these other people out there and they won't talk about this, and I'm like, is he talking about me? I talk about this, right? It's like, take everything personal. Why can't I buy 4S motors for 6S battery and just limit them in beta flight? You can. You can. A motor output limit of more than about 75% can introduce problems like maybe increased risk of desync. But you could do you could buy 2400 kV motors, do a 66% motor output limit, and it'll work. Some people, Ciati famously does that. Do you still do that, Ciati? I see you in the chat. He did it for over a year with no problems. There are some differences. It's not like you will get the exact same performance and efficiency as a 6S motor. So if you intend to fly 6S batteries, you should get 1700 kV, 1900 kV, whatever the appropriate kV is. But if for some reason you have to do that or want to do that, you totally can. Mupshot, on your Walksnail VTX, you're only seeing 25, 200, 500. Though that's correct. The 1S, I think it maxes at 350 or 450 milliwatts, but it shows as 500 in the menu. So if you set to 500, you should be at max power. Trixie says, I'm just starting FPV and I got my first drone. Is the iFlight Nazgul 5 V3 a good choice? Yes, it's an excellent choice. That is a really good 5-inch freestyle drone, and it is at a really good price. If you get the analog version, it's at an even better price. It's one of the best values in terms of quality versus performance today. The only thing I would say is make sure you have enough time in the simulator that you need between 10 and 30 hours in the sim, depending on how much of a natural you are, because a 5-inch, if you try to learn to fly on a 5-inch, you will lose or destroy it way before you learn to fly. If you insist on learning to fly with a real quad, do it with something like a Tiny Whoop that can take a beating and is not going to hurt anybody if it hits them in the face. The best thing to do is to learn to fly in the simulator when you are moderately confident in the simulator. Like you can take off, fly around for a little bit, and then set down mostly where you intend to without just sort of being out of control and crashing. When you can do that in the simulator, then you're good to go in real life. But don't try to learn on a 5-inch if you don't have any experience in a simulator first. As a first 5-inch, that's a great choice. MJ asks, I'm from Europe and I'm wondering, what is the problem with remote ID? Well, I clicked on the question, so I'll answer it briefly, even though I don't want to do too much more remote ID stuff. Just make the whole live stream about remote ID. The problem with remote ID is the cost and weight of the module, for one thing. Security and privacy implications. People being able to see where the pilot is. Some people are concerned that will result in them being assaulted by people who don't like drones. That's not entirely unreasonable. And just general American dislike of the government getting up in our shit, which I think Europeans don't quite have as strong of a knee-jerk reaction to. But when your entire country was founded on the principle of shut up, go away to the government, then that sort of is ingrained in your culture and your national mindset in a way that maybe Europeans don't share. Not that Europeans haven't had some revolutions in their time, but I think you understand what I mean. Is the GEP-RC Cinelog 3.5 V2 still a good Cinewhoop for 2023? Matthew, it's still good. I think some people would say to look at the Cinebot, especially if you plan to carry a heavier camera, but it's a good choice. One of the best, I think. Siati, where are you at on the Cinelog 3.5? Siati flies a lot of whoops.
Hey, there's another question here. Will you ever review the Cinebot 30?
Will I ever review the Cinebot 3.0? I don't know. I hesitate to review Cinewhoops because, like, they all seem the same to me. And if I can't, like, really tell the difference between them, then I don't know if I should be reviewing them. Like, why do you want to, like, specifically review the Cinebot 3.0? I don't know. I think I might have one. I don't know. Maybe. But maybe not. I go back and forth on what products I should review. Siati says, I don't really understand any of those prop-guarded rigs. They're too dangerous around people, at which point just fly a non-guarded rig. I mean, aren't the prop guards going to help a little bit if you, like, tap a wall? I mean, I don't think the prop guards really do a lot. Siati also thinks that the guards aren't tall enough to slow it down enough for cinematic slow lines. Interesting. Let's get some more super chats. We've gone for a minute since the last time I got super chats. This super chat is from Sam. Hi, Sam. Thank you for a $5 super chat. I'm relatively new to the hobby, and I was wondering what the benefit of having a 107 license is in relation to FPV piloting. And you also mentioned Part 97, which is a ham license. The ham license is required for most video transmitters that we use. A huge number of people don't have a ham license, and no one seems to care. But technically, to be fully legal, you would... Well, that's not even true. Because the interesting thing is that Part 97 ham license is amateur. It is explicitly non-commercial. So, in fact, as far as I can tell, there is no way to use Part 97 for commercial work, even though a lot of people are using Part 97 gear for commercial work. And again, nobody really cares. So get your ham license if you want to be strictly legal, in the most as legal as possible. But realistically, most people don't. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's how it is. As far as Part 107 goes, you are more likely to come across FAA enforcement if you're doing commercial drone work without a Part 107. And the other thing is that if you try to go out and get hired, as opposed to put you're self-employed as a drone pilot, if you try to go out and get hired, anyone who hires you is going to want to know that you have 107 for legal and insurance and liability purposes. Again, you might find a realtor somewhere who's like, hey, I need you to take some pictures of these houses, and they don't really know what they're doing. But as soon as you start getting into anybody who knows what they're doing, they're going to want you to have a 107. So if you're going to do commercial drone work, you should probably get a 107 and shit while you're at it. Get your ham license too, just to have your bases covered. But it's just about regulation. It's not, you don't really learn anything in the 107 course that makes you a better pilot. Here's a question from Demir FPV. Thank you for 555. Ooh, that's a new currency for me. What is a TRY? Turkish lira. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, no, that's not as bad as I thought. Thank you for 55 Turkish lira. My flight controller doesn't have a barometer. I installed a GPS and magnetometer to SPI and UART. Is it possible to install only the barometer to SPI? How to connect two sensors to one SPI? So, Demir, I am pretty sure that you can connect multiple devices in parallel to... Wait, you said SPI. Did you mean I2C? Or did you definitely mean SPI? I don't know how you connected to SPI, since most flight controllers don't have SPI pads that you can solder to. You could have direct soldered to the pins on the MCU, but I'm guessing that isn't what you did. Are you sure you didn't mean I2C? I2C, which is on the flight controller, the SDA and the SCL pad, that you can connect multiple peripherals to. Just connect them in parallel, and it somehow figures it out. ADHD FPV, thank you for a 250 Canadian. Will WTFOS Butter work on 0607 to roll back for WTFOS? Butter will work on anything. It doesn't matter. That's the beauty of Butter. It will roll back anything, any firmware that's on the V2 goggles or whatever hardware it supports, it will roll back. It uses their sort of emergency recovery bootloader kind of thing to flash them. And I don't think there's anything it doesn't work on. So I don't 100%. I think there's a nuance to your question, ADHD, that I might be missing. But basically, the answer to your question is yes, it will work. Harel Ben Ishay asks, thank you for 7, I think, shekels. Opinions on Jumper T Pro V2 versus Radiomaster TX12 Mark II ELRS. That's an interesting one. The V1 of the T Pro had some issues. It wasn't terrible, but it did have some issues. And he said versus the... Oh, hang on. Radiomaster TX12 Mark II. Let's look at these side by side. T Pro V2. Oh, this is a T Pro, not the T Lite. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the wrong one. So the main reason that you would choose one of these versus the other is the form factor. Do you want this gamepad style form factor, or do you want this traditional style form factor? Both of them are a smaller radio, but the TX12 is a little larger. If you want gamepad style, then the T Pro is not a bad choice. It's got a 1 watt internal Express LRS module. That's nice. The TX12, the Express LRS version, I'm pretty sure maxes at 250 milliwatts. That is 1/4 the power, or approximately 1/2 the range. Now, you may not care about that. You may have plenty of range and not need all that, but it is worth mentioning. The T Pro has relatively few buttons and switches compared to the TX12, which has a lot more buttons and switches. And the T Pro has a smaller screen. But overall, I think either one could be a good choice, depending on what form factor you want. I don't think there's a deal breaker either way. I think I personally would take the TX12 because I usually like the traditional form factor of a radio. Of course, I would take the Boxer because I like that better, but that's not what you asked. George RC, thank you for a $5 super chat. I am having an issue where my Foxeer H743 keeps disconnecting over USB when my Maytech receiver goes into Wi-Fi mode. Any thoughts? My guess is that the receiver is kicking the flight controller into bootloader mode. That's my best guess. Try moving the receiver to a different UART. Yeah. Try moving it to a different UART.
Also, I mean, it's possible. I don't know how much power it takes for Wi-Fi mode, but is it possible it's somehow overdrawing the back, like from flip into Wi-Fi mode? Because that's the only other possibility, right?
I mean, you think I don't think it's browning out the 5-volt back. That doesn't.
Yeah, I just didn't know it started talking over the UART when the Wi-Fi mode kicked in differently, but maybe it does in the code.
I don't know. I agree. It's a little weird, but that's like the closest thing I can come to an answer.
For sure.
Like, it's not a perfect answer, but like if it were me, I would try moving it to a different UART. You could try. You know what you could do is you could just disconnect the TX and RX wires, and see if that fixes it. And if that does fix it, then you need to move to a different UART. Yeah. I want to address this question that's come up in the Discord. Going back to remote ID very briefly. The question is, why is it that the FAA allows ultralight aircraft up to, I think it's 250 pounds without registration, without any licensing, right? They don't need to have ADS-B or anything. And so the question is, if it's dangerous to have a drone weighing 251 grams flying in the airspace without remote ID, why is it okay to have a 249-pound aircraft with a human on it flying in the airspace without remote ID or something analogous to it? And I agree that that's an interesting distinction. But to me, it doesn't necessarily, it's not as ludicrous as it seems. The FAA's position, as I see it, is that if you are willing to put your own life at risk by flying an experimental aircraft, okay, you will only make that mistake once. And so there's simply more at stake. You can take a drone, an FPV drone, and you can fly it anywhere you want. And then when it creates a problem, you can simply turn off your transmitter, put your goggles in your backpack, and walk away. And that scares people Whereas if you get in an ultralight and you land your ultralight on the White House lawn, as I think once happened, at the end of that interaction, you will be in custody or deceased. And then that problem will not happen again. And to me, that's why the FAA is more restrictive of drones than they are of aircraft, full-scale aircraft with people in them. Because at the end of the day, with a full-scale aircraft, there is a person in the aircraft who can be held accountable by the law or by physics for their actions, and drones don't have that. Now, the other thing, remote ID also doesn't really solve that problem, but they think it solves that problem. They are all sharing the collective delusion that remote ID solves that problem. And under that belief system, that's why you don't need it for full-scale aircraft or ultralights. Thank you for £5 from Costas DNB. I'm going to hope that DNB stands for drum and bass. Fortune Cookie. So how long until we lose sub 52? No idea. Thank you for a $5 super chat. Who knows? Eventually. I mean, no, never mind. Ed 1995. Thank you for a €5 super chat. Best 3D printer for TPU and PLA with a big printing area. Direct drive under 450 USD. Sovol SVO6 Plus. Ed, I have had good results with Sovol printers. You have to understand when you buy a Sovol printer that you're getting a printer made to a price. I see people on the Sovol Facebook group, and most people are happy, but every so often there's one person who's like, I hate this printer. It's a POS. I can't believe it. When you buy a printer in the price range of a Sovol, there is a chance that you'll get a bad one. And you may need to jump through some hoops to get it taken care of. There is a good chance that you'll get a good one. And even the good ones, you will need to screw with to get them working right. But if you want a larger format 3D printer in the $450 price range, you have to understand that you're going to need to jump through some hoops and go through a little bit of hassle to get good results. If you're okay with that, I think the Sovol SVO6 Plus might be okay. Like, I haven't specifically researched the SVO6 Plus to see if there's any like known defects for it. So I would go look on like the Sovol Facebook group, but the Sovol in general makes okay products at a price. And I think at that price, generally you get what you pay for. You get more than what you pay for. But you have to know going into it that you are going to need to screw with it. You're going to need to tweak it. You're going to need to do some tuning. It is not just an out-of-the-box experience. Remember the West. Thank you for 555. JB, I know you want to stay away from remote ID, but real quick, do you think eventually sub 250s will be impacted by remote ID? I think that if on a long enough time scale, it's easy to assume that the rights will be eroded and go away. So who knows? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows whether 250 grams is something that they're going to stick by or whether it was just a bone that they threw us to take away later. Who knows? All right, and that's caught up on Super Chats. Thank you so much to everybody who's left some Super Chats. We're going to go back to the regular chat. Let's see here. Arista says, I've been at a friend's stag do, and the amount of drones flying around was insane. Any suggested video or reading for noobs? I mean, I found myself here. Ooh, suggested videos or reading for noobs. Blunty, this is a tough one. Like, where do you start somebody? I mean, I have a build guide for beginners, but he probably doesn't want to build.
Just about drones?
Like a Matt Pochwat video. Does Matt Pochwat have a video for him? Or Potato jet? I don't know. I hate to send people away from my channel. So maybe this is like, oh, I need to make this video. But like a lot of my content is very FPV centric. And I assume you've sort of already been bit by the bug.
I guess I'm confused about what we want to know here. If he just wants to know about all drones, yeah, I have no idea. If he wants to know about FPV, I think FPV Flight Dynamics is a good option. That book you can buy explains where FPV lands inside of the drone culture. But yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on the question.
Yeah, it's really bad when someone says, "Hey, I need a recommendation," and the recommendation is not your product, like as just from a business perspective. Especially an FPV beginner's guide, what I learned when getting started 3 years ago. Like, that seems like it might be a good choice. I don't really have that video. Like, just a generic starter guide. Everything I have is super technical. Interesting. Is that like one of his first videos? Wow. Yeah. I don't know. Let's just go to YouTube. We'll go in an incognito window, and we'll type FPV drone. What do we got? Best FPV photo drones for beginners. Peter Lindgren, 43K views.
I think the question is what we want to know. Like, people are pointing out there's a How to FPV series by Mr. Steele, but do we want to know what? I don't know what the goal is. Are we trying to learn how to get into FPV, how to build FPV, know what FPV is, know what drones are? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are all different videos.
I don't even know who Man from Earth is, so no disrespect intended. I hate it when like a travel blogger with how many subs? 71K subs. It's not even as many subs as me. How does Man from Earth, who isn't an FPV specialist, have a video with 518,000 views, how to start in 2023?
Because he has you remember we talked about the buckets?
I know. It's because he has DJI.
He's clearly in a DJI bucket.
He's in a DJI bucket. And because he's in that big bucket, 741K views on his freaking DJI Avata.
For people who don't know, the basic idea is that as you build a YouTube channel, you'll find yourself within a bucket, and a bucket just means a set of content. So maybe we have an FPV bucket, and it's a very small bucket because it's FPV related to everything else. But DJI is a pretty big one. So if you can land yourself well in the DJI bucket, keep getting recommended, keep getting subscribers to click on your videos first because they like DJI, you sort of build this thing above your own subscriber base that is this bucket you live in, and you can see that's what he's done.
You're saying that if I were to make this exact same video, because my audience isn't the DJI bucket, I still wouldn't be as successful as him.
That's what I believe. Yeah, I mean, it might go crazy, but it wouldn't. I don't think it would be anywhere near that amount of views based on your people. And I will say, we've looked at your analytics before, and we see that DJI is in your searches, but you're just not. I don't think you're fully in that bucket. And we don't want to. We've talked about it, but that's not the content we're trying to make. So.
Yeah, but I want to get 500,000 views, Blinty. My wife is starting an online shop. She wants to start an online shop. It doesn't even matter what's in the shop, but she wants the online shop to have stuff that she likes. She's like, I want to make a shop that's just full of stuff that I think is cute and interesting. And she says, I do not want to be in a niche. I refuse to be in a niche. I'm going to have pillows and phone cases and rugs, and I'm going to put everything in this shop that I think is candles. I will not niche down. And then she's like, struggling because she puts all this work into the shop, but it doesn't get as much traction as she would like. And I'm like, she's like, what do I have to do to be successful? She's like, why does your website get a bunch of views even though your website is crappy? She's like, do you know your SEO keywords? Do you know your target audience? I'm like, I don't know any of that stuff. I just have a website and it gets views and makes money. And she says, it's because you're in a niche. So and it's just like me and DJI. It's like, I want 500,000 views. Okay, make DJI content. Shut up! I don't want to do that. I don't want to make DJI content. I just want the views. It's just like her and her website. Niche. I don't know. Continuing on. What motors would you suggest for the QAVS JB frame build on a 4S? iFlight Zing E or Emax Eco 2 are both 2306 or 2207. I would take 2207, but 2306 is just about as good. Shoot for about 2400 kV. It's just as middle of the line as you could get. McRon FPV wants to know, have you ever seen a flight controller that kills ESCs? It's hard for me to imagine how that would happen, but if, like, the flight controller was putting VBAT onto the signal wires, that would fry the ESC. So it's not impossible, but it's pretty unlikely.
Can I just suggest real quick that could also happen if you were wiring the wires wrong, possibly. I mean, you'd have to get them really wrong in the perfect way, I think. Because otherwise you're not connecting power. But if you connected, like, maybe power to one signal rail and that connected to the other signal rail or something. Yeah.
The flight controller killing the I could see the ESC kill the flight controller if it was miswired. But the flight controller killing the ESC is... That's hard.
If he wired power and then the signal wire is going back to signal and then it goes in and back out or something. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. How to pronounce niche? Niche. I mean, I'm just going to say it how I want to say it, but let's hear how it's supposed to be pronounced. We got volume here. Are we going to hear it? Am I missing? Is there audio here? I'm sorry. What if I click through? Is Discord muted? Is this a joke?
It's at 7 to 10, 6 to 10 seconds. Go to like 6 seconds in the video.
Niche.
Okay. Emma's saying, did you really put 30 seconds of silence before you put your content? I hate you. I hate you. Why would you do that? Why would you put 30 seconds of silence?
Niche. Also American. Niche.
Okay. I wish I could downvote this whole channel. Downvote this
niche.
Video.
Also.
I downvote this video. Why? Because you need. Is there a reason you need it to be more than a minute? So it does. I don't know. Anyway. Of all the things to be angry about. Oh, not that. Looking to get into Tiny Whoops. I already own DJI goggles too. Should I go HD0 or Avatar for tiny whooping? The question, that question mostly pertains to whether you care more about latency or whether you care more about range and penetration. I think that the Avatar VTX is going to give you better resolution, more range, and more penetration than HD0, but HD0 is going to give you a smoother, low latency signal, and it's just a question of which you care most about. A way to approach this problem, if you have all the money in the world, would be to buy the HD0 goggles and the Walksnail VRX. Boom. And now you have the best of both worlds and you can pick. So Big J 541 wants to know, is Emu Flight dead? I don't think so. I actually got a message recently. I'm not going to put it on screen, but I'm going to just check here. I got a message recently. No, maybe it was on Discord. I thought I got a message recently from Kevin Plaisir, the Emu Flight dev, saying that they had added some targets and done some, added, I don't know, was H7 targets or something. So I don't think it's fully dead, but it is not as alive as it once was. Let's put it that way. Unruly has switched yaw and roll on the radio and can't figure out how to switch them back. That would be probably in the mixes screen. So I would look at your input and your mixes screen. And look at the where those inputs. Make sure that the roll input is assigned to the roll channel and vice versa. And then make sure that in the mixer screen, which channel they're on is correct. Oh, fun. Thank you to the mods for helping out with the moderation duties. Can
I call Audible for a question real quick?
Sure. Hold on. Let me get this one since I clicked it.
Okay.
Thorsten Panowitz wants to know, where is acro mode or manual mode? Acro, he says in acro the servos are still moving. In acro mode, there will still be stabilization. It just will not auto level. It will just stay at the angle that it's at. If you want direct pass-through with no stabilization, I don't know how to tell you how to do that because I have very little experience with wings. But in acro mode, the servos are still moving. I think because in acro mode, it just means that the aircraft won't auto level. It will stay at the angle you put it at, but it will still stabilize at that angle. Okay, go ahead, Blunty. What do you got?
Okay, sorry, bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, Wedgwood.
Uh-huh. Oh, shut up. For real?
I had to bring it up because it showed up. So
we talked about this before the stream, and I was like, Blunty was like, should we mention this issue? And I was like, come on, Blunty. Even the devs say only like 3 people got affected by this. Okay, you got me. Blunty, do you have the link handy? Will you put it in the live stream chat?
I will grab it and put it there, yep.
Thank you. There is a bug in WTFOS that is extremely rare, but when it affects you, it causes the goggles to reboot mid-flight. It has just been announced, and there is a fix for it. And
essentially, the fix is go update. So if you're using WTFOS on those V2 goggles, you need to go update. Also, if you're not using WTFOS on the V2 goggles and you're before version like 10200, that's also a restart bug that was DJI's restart bug.
Okay.
So make sure you've updated your goggles all the way. And if you're on a WTFOS, that restarting bug could be WTFOS, so you need to go update that again. It was just released 2 days ago.
Yeah, so you need to go to the WTFOS website and update to the latest firmware. That's the takeaway. That is a known bug and it will be fixed. Or it is fixed in the latest firmware. Robin Hellstrom asks, why are no reviewers looking at Rotor Riot drones? Is it some sort of blockage of their products? Robin, I review Rotor Riot drones. I have reviewed them in the past. I don't think that Rotor Riot sends review product to reviewers. I think that Rotor Riot relies on their own team pilots to make content about their products. And, obviously I'm not like on their marketing team. I don't know what their internal decision-making process is, but it doesn't seem like, I also don't see anybody except Rotor Riot pilots making content about Rotor Riot drones. And so we can infer that they have decided that it is not worth spending the money to send product to reviewers to get the reviewer to promote and give feedback on the drone. On the quad. But I don't think that reviewers are like blocking Rotor Riot, if that's what you meant. I'm pretty sure that there is no shortage of people who would be happy to receive a $500 drone in exchange for an honest and fair review. Madcap says, I'm having issues with high definition OSD. Just got the V2 goggles with the Mark V O3 Air unit. The Mark V has Betaflight 4.3 on it. I agree. If you have a bind and fly with a working config, don't rush to update to a new version of Betaflight. You should be able to get normal OSD. Now, WTFOS doesn't work. WTFOS does not apply to the O3 Air unit in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So forget about routing. Forget about WTFOS. None of that matters because you're using the O3 Air unit. But with the O3 Air unit, you should be able to get working OSD, just not the HD OSD, the standard definition. So what I would say to do is go into Betaflight, and we're going to choose the 4.3 presets here in the versions. Do we have an O3 preset for 4.3? Well, great, we don't. Well, that sucks. You'll have to set it up manually. Can we just... That's a VTX preset. Is that going to work? Do I have a preset? I think I have a preset that would work. Go to preset sources, the JB presets. Hold on. I have an OSD preset that will probably work. And what I would do is I would choose the PAL preset. You can't see that at all, can you? I would choose the PAL preset and then choose the correct UART here. And you can get that from this preset source. You need to add a preset source and put this information in exactly as shown here. And then add new source. Okay? And if you do that, you can find the JB OSD presets preset, and you should apply the... I think the WTFOS preset will actually work on the O3. So that's the one I would tell you to use on the O3. I know it's confusing because I just said WTFOS has nothing to do with you because you use O3. But I think that the WTFOS preset will... I think those CLI commands will be compatible and will work. So you're not going to root them or anything. Cody Lambert is getting yaw input when they go up on the stick. Well, the first thing you got to do is find out if your yaw stick is actually moving when you raise the stick. Cody says, I'm sure I'm not giving it yaw input. Okay, that's fine, but you could have a messed up gimbal. That's really common. So what you need to do is, in your controller, bring up the screen that shows the stick positions, and then slowly raise the yaw stick and look at the dot on the graphic. And if the dot goes, then you know your gimbal's messed up. One IFPV wants to know how often I do an unsolicited review. Almost all of my reviews are unsolicited. Almost all of my reviews, I see a product, I think it's interesting, I ask to get it or buy it. That's not all, maybe 15%, maybe at most 20% are a manufacturer saying, hey, do you want this product? Do you want us to send it to you? Most of them are unsolicited. Excuse me. Hale wants to know, can you recommend an FPV kit under $1,000? Maybe. Let's see if it comes in under $1,000. Everything you need under $1,000. Does Rotorite still have the special on their starter kits? Fat Shark HD 3-inch starter kit. And I would get the without ducts, unless you really want to fly it indoors. $9.99, baby. Give me that sweet, sweet affiliate money. Hang on. At RR. There we go. Get that affiliate code in there. Make a bit.ly link here. And ba-bing. So that is an example of everything you need to get started for under $1,000. If you want to fly indoors or have a little bit more protection at the cost of acro performance, go for the 3-inch ducted. My personal pick would be the 3.5-inch without ducts. That's for you, Hale. What is a good light 3.5-inch frame? The AOS 3. It's good. It's not too heavy. Gets a little bit of flack for being not as durable as people would want, but I'm a fan of it. Let's see here. How are we doing on Super Chats? We got about 15 minutes left in the stream. No more Super Chats. We're really light on Super Chats today. My goodness. Interesting. I don't know why. Some weeks are big and some are not. There you go. It's Sai wants to move from FreeSky to Express LRS for long range. Any suggestions? Yeah, do it. I would suggest checking out my video. This information for the Express LRS definitive getting started guide. It's a little bit much, but it will get your head in the game. You don't need to watch every single chapter. You can just focus on some of the key chapters. But that's a good place to get started. And then also, I would say, check out my website, fpvknowitall.com, fpvknowitall.com. And if you go to the controllers and receivers section, there's suggestions for what Express LRS hardware you might want to pick up. So that's where I would say you should get started. Peter Novak wants to know, why do FPV pilots prefer to use analog over digital, especially for racing? So I would dispute that FPV pilots in general prefer analog over digital. I think that may have been true in the past. I think that we have probably crossed the 51% threshold where more pilots have more rigs on digital than they do on analog. If we haven't crossed the 51% threshold, we're sure close. For racing, the reason analog is preferred is because analog has lower latency and consistent latency, and that is relevant when you're flying at high speed and need maximum precision. Also, analog video transmitters are compatible with the timing systems used at races, whereas digital video transmitters, especially DJI, less so. Walk Snail, and HC0 actually is fully compatible. But DJI specifically is not fully compatible with the timing systems used at races. So a lot of times if you show up at a race with DJI, you'll mess with the timing. They'll miss your laps. You may throw off other people's laps, and it just is a little bit of a... But since most racers don't like DJI anyway, that's less of an issue. It's just sort of like a cherry on top. Digital is difficult to use in large races. They'll have some kind of officiating system, like they'll have a DVR that records everybody's laps, so that if there's a question of did you finish your lap, or did you miss a gate, or did you go the wrong way through an element, they can go back and they can look at the DVR and they can see what happened. Did you start too early? I don't know. with digital systems, a lot of times that is not, there's no way to do that effectively like there is with analog, or it's very, very difficult or expensive. HD0 actually has a thing called the HD0 event receiver, which can receive both HD0 and analog signals and output them as HDMI, so people can easily record. So that's another place where HD0 is very compatible with racing, but Walk-Snail and DJI are less compatible. But that's why you see racers preferring analog and now HD0 over Walk-Snail and DJI. I think that in general, casual pilots and freestyle pilots, I would say that they at least 51% more than half prefer digital. And the big reason that many of them still fly analog has more to do with price than preference, that a lot of people would prefer digital, but they can't afford it yet. Aber the Ham, by the way, thank you for the $20 super chat and the Happy Father's Day wish, Aber. Aber the Ham says people were using both HD0 and Walk-Snail at the last whoop race I went to. There was a dedicated high-definition heat just for good measure, but in general, both systems seem to be working okay. Yeah, Walk-Snail I don't think has as much trouble as DJI with the variable output power of the VTX throwing off the timing system, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Sickbird says, my O3 Air unit doesn't have an option for HD canvas. Yeah, you need to update the goggle firmware. That's where you'll get the HD canvas option. I mean, you need to update them both. If you didn't update the goggles, he says, is my firmware on WTFOS V2 goggles the problem? No. Again, if you are using the O3 Air unit, WTFOS is not relevant. Because you're going to take those goggles and you're going to take them out of digital FPV system mode and you're going to put them in O3 mode. And at that point, WTFOS doesn't exist for the most part. Once those goggles are in, what you need to do is put the goggles in O3 mode, then update the firmware using DJI FPV Assistant, and then you should get the HD canvas option. Is digital FPV price ever coming down? Asks Froggy FPV. Is it ever coming down? Almost the same price as analog? No. 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 It's more expensive to make, and since when do prices ever come down these days? In short, no. Your Majesty, thank you for a 913 super chat. I cannot turn on the lava lamp. The lava lamp has died. It stopped working. Like, not just like the lens burned out. Ciati got me that lava lamp as a gift years ago, and it sat on my bench for a long time. It is now dead. Maybe I'll get another lava lamp eventually, but for now, no. Thank you, Aber, for the $20 super chat. Skesix, thank you for a $2 super chat. And happy Father's Day. Big Data Pimp, thank you for a $5 super chat, wants to know, how often do I have to mow my yard? So I mow my yard, I think if I don't do it every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, it gets really hard to keep up with. It gets really overgrown, and then when I cut it, it's a real hassle. So at a minimum, I go through it every 2 weeks. I keep up with it. What I do, though, is I actually use the push mower, and that's how I get, like, some exercise. I found out that, like, I have this thing. This is a Whoop fitness tracker. Some of you may know of it. And it tracks, like, your heart rate throughout the day and tells you how much exercise you got. And I can get on, like, a treadmill, and I can, like, run for 40 minutes or whatever and get a certain amount of exertion, according to this fitness tracker. Or I can go out and I can mow the lawn and I get like the same amount of exertion, except when I'm on the treadmill, I just want to like die because it's boring and hard. And when I'm out there mowing the lawn, I'm just listening to a podcast. I'm pushing the mower. I'm out in the weather. It feels good. And it says, according to this thing, I get the same amount of exercise. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I just started using the push mower. I almost never use the riding mower anymore. So what I'll do is I'll go out there and I'll mow for like an hour. And I'll get like one little section of my yard that I could have done with the riding mower in 20 minutes, but who cares, right? And that's just like my exercise for the day. So then like the next day I'll go out there and I'll do a different section. So the whole yard is never mowed at one time. It's all in various states of growth. And then I pretty much, pretty much just go out and do it again for exercise. So sometimes I mow it way more often than once every 2 weeks, just depending on how much exercise I'm getting. Aber the Ham, I don't use a snowplow or a tow hitch or anything like that. I've heard of people doing that. I don't know how effective it would be. What's the best long-range VTX? Thank you for a $2 super chat, or €2 super chat. DNA Oma, I would steer you toward the Foxier Reaper or the Rush Solo VTX. Thank you for $5. Matt Sanders, has Betaflight fixed the GPS bugs? Is 442 safe? Matt Sanders, I am not sure about that. I don't think that the issues with the M10 GPS have been fixed. Those will not be fixed, I think, until Betaflight 4.5. So if you have an M10 chip on your GPS, then you'll need to either do the manual configuration of the GPS. I made a video about that if you go back and look at my channel. So I don't know about any other GPS bugs that are in 4.4 that might or might not have been fixed. I think that in general, I would hold off if you're depending heavily on GPS rescue until 4.5. Prop Butcher, thank you for a $5 super chat. When I chop throttle while cruising forward, I get bobbles. What should I adjust to eliminate that? Prop Butcher, it depends a lot on the exact way that the bobbles are happening, which obviously a YouTube comment isn't going to communicate to us. But if at 0 throttle the quad becomes unstable, make sure that air mode is enabled. If during the throttle move the quad wobbles, that's a different. That could be anti-gravity gain. That's a little harder to troubleshoot. It'd be nice if we had video, but obviously you can't share video in a YouTube comment. So if you want to email me a link to video, I'll definitely take a look at it. Bad for Life suggests lower PWM frequency. That's going to give you increased torque and increased braking torque. That's certainly possible. Higher idle speed. I don't think you should need higher idle speed on most builds. I mean, we don't know anything about your build, so I don't think you should need to increase idle speed on like larger builds, 5-inch and 4-inch and so on. Maybe down in the 65 millimeter, 75 millimeter size, you would need higher idle speed. Anyway. There you go. All right, folks, that is going to bring us to the end of the stream. Thank you guys for humoring me as I ranted about remote ID for a while. Aaron Ciotti is going to be streaming just in a couple minutes, starting at 3 p.m. on his channel, and he is posting a link to that here in the chat. You go check him out. Simulator Sunday, diving buildings and chasing drift cars in the sim. Thank you, Sunshine, for the PSA about WTFOS not being relevant on the 03.
We also got one more super chat if you want to check that.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't want to miss a super chat. Thank you, Blenty. What do we got? Happy Father's Day, JB. Have you flown the fractals? Any opinions? I am loving them. Thank you for $5, Paul Stevenson. Paul Stevenson, I have not flown the fractal Tiny Whoops. They are a lighter weight. The big question about those fractals is the durability. I mean, they're lighter weight, so you have better performance, but what are you giving up in terms of durability? And I hear different things from different people, but I haven't personally flown one. Excuse me. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. Siati says they're heavier. How are they heavier, Siati? How are they heavier? Doesn't make any sense. I know Siati doesn't like the fractals. I was trying not to set him off. How are they heavier? But there's less. I guess these ones have the ducts. They still use Fractal 65 frame kit. Oh, I see. I guess I was thinking of the ones without the ducts, the naked ones, being lighter. Those are lighter, right? I see your point. Siati's point is that you add the carbon brace and lose the battery, but you keep the plastic ducts. I was thinking of the open prop versions as being lighter. Yes, I see that this version is going to be heavier because you have carbon instead of plastic.
We got one more super chat. Just keeping you informed.
Oh, great. I'm just going to keep streaming. Quad City Bay Area, thanks for a $5 super chat. So what's going to happen? Cop's going to carry a gram scale? Oh, who effing knows, dude? Who effing knows? Why not have a scale that they can measure to see if you're over 250 grams? The best advice I have about remote ID is if you are like Bot Grinder and you have said no to remote ID and you are flying without remote ID, and someone comes up and says, "Excuse me, son, do you have remote ID on that aircraft?" Say, "Yes, sir. Hold on a second, officer. I'm just going to set it down." And then just freaking send it to the moon. Or crash it in a freaking bush somewhere. Oh, I crashed. Oh, I guess we may never know. Right? Just land it on top of a building. Unplug your goggles and be like, "Oh, man, just lost video there. It's the weirdest thing." Anyway. Alrighty, guys. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for coming out. I'll see you tomorrow for the stream. Have a great stream, Siati. And thank you, Blunty, for helping out.
Yep, of course. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.